Millionaire left his pregnant wife for the mistress at the funeral. Only one woman stood proud. There are stories that shatter families into 1,000 unrecognizable pieces, and then there are stories so turbulent that the fragments never quite fit back together. This is one of those stories, a whirlwind of wealth, betrayal, heartbreak, and a funeral that brought every emotion roaring to the surface. On a cold autumn morning, a millionaire's final farewell became the stage for revelations that no one expected. Attendees wore solemn black, their faces masked by grief or perhaps something darker secrets. And in the midst of it all stood one lone woman, chin raised, eyes fierce. Her presence alone defied tragedy, and the truth demanded to be told. Charles Charlie Ashworth III was the last living heir of the prestigious Ashworth estate, a sprawling property in the heart of California's Napa Valley. The estate boasted rolling vineyards, centuries-old oaks, and a Mediterranean-style mansion that towered over the countryside. The mere mention of the Ashworth name in local circles evoked images of prosperity, vintage wines, and philanthropic endeavors that spanned decades. Even People magazine had once featured the Ashworth family in an article titled "America's Wine Royalty," which highlighted the influential role they played in shaping the region's culture and economy. Charlie was tall, athletic, and possessed a magnetic charm that could make the sternest of skeptics crack a smile. He had attended Stanford University for his MBA and met all the right people, future billionaires, children of tech magnates, and the occasional Hollywood star's offspring. Through these connections, he built a network that catapulted his family's business from mere wineries to a diverse portfolio of luxury restaurants, boutique hotels, and technology investments. By age 35, Charlie was not just a millionaire, he was a bona fide multi-millionaire heading toward the billionaire stratosphere. Reporters from Forbes described him as the next big thing in West Coast entrepreneurship. But behind the polished veneer, Charlie's personal life was a different story. He had courted many women, typically heiresses or socialites from wealthy families, but each relationship disintegrated. Rumors circulated that Charlie was reckless with love, a hopeless romantic at heart, yet also prone to chasing fleeting thrills. A photograph in Vanity Fair showed him with a mysterious brunette at a yacht party in Monaco. A month later, local tabloids caught him dining with a Swedish model in Los Angeles. One close friend, Patrick Marino, was once overheard telling a reporter, "Charlie can close a business deal in minutes, but he's a complete mess when it comes to matters of the heart." Then Natalie Townsend arrived into his life. The Townsends were old New England money, owners of a series of upscale department stores dotted across Boston and New York. A mutual friend, the well-respected lawyer Mark Ridley from K&L Gates, introduced them at a charity gala in San Francisco. Natalie was a young philanthropist known for her passion for literacy programs, and her warmth and intelligence captivated Charlie more than any model or socialite ever had. Their courtship unfolded like a fairy tale. Late-night dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, surprise getaways to Venice, where they danced under the moonlight, and emotional phone calls that stretched into dawn. Newspapers and gossip columns quickly labeled them America's new power couple. When Charlie proposed to Natalie in a private villa overlooking the Tuscan hills, the world seemed to cheer. Their wedding in Napa became a star-studded affair, attended by the who's who of business, entertainment, and politics, including a congratulatory message from former President Barack Obama. And so, Charlie's reputation seemed to shift from that of a carefree playboy to a devoted husband with philanthropic leanings. Wine critics lauded the Ashworth label's new releases, while philanthropic organizations scrambled for the couple's support. Even Charlie's father's longtime friend, David Sampson, a venture capitalist in Palo Alto, whispered, "Maybe this marriage is exactly what Charlie needs to tame his restless soul." Everyone wanted a piece of the glamorous life that Charlie and Natalie radiated like a perfect photograph, well lit and carefully framed. Yet in the hushed corners of the estate, whispers persisted. Some employees had witnessed heated arguments when the cameras weren't rolling. Others claimed to have seen Charlie hunched over his phone late at night, exchanging texts with unknown contacts. Even a driver once confided to a friend that Natalie sometimes wept in the car during her morning commute. Still, the general public had an unwavering belief in the fairy tale. Whatever was brewing beneath the surface, no one could confirm yet. Natalie Ashworth, née Townsend, lived a life that outsiders assumed to be enchanting. From the day she said, "I do," she envisioned building a genuine family, one where love triumphed over wealth, and heartfelt connections mattered more than brand deals or social status. She poured her energy into charitable endeavors, chairing literacy campaigns in underserved communities and forging ties with education-focused nonprofits around the world. The Ashworth Family Foundation recognized her initiatives, funneling millions into new scholarship programs under her guidance. But once the spotlight dimmed, Natalie found herself alone on most evenings, strolling through the vast corridors of the Ashworth mansion. Even in the glow of crystal chandeliers and gilded decor, she felt a profound hollowness. Her husband's frequent business trips stretched longer, often overshadowed by red carpet events she wasn't invited to. The staff were polite and doted on her every request, but even their courtesy had a detached, formal edge. Natalie sometimes felt she was living in a curated museum, where every piece was elegantly placed, yet lacked warmth. One afternoon, while sorting through mail in the foyer, Natalie noticed a letter addressed to Charlie from a Beverly Hills address. The sender's name, in flowing script, read, Margaret West. It was unusual for Charlie to receive personal letters at home. He preferred business correspondence to go through his office. Curiosity tugged at Natalie, but she prided herself on respecting boundaries. Carefully, she placed the envelope on Charlie's desk. Days later, she found the unopened envelope discarded in the trash. But fate, or perhaps a deeper sense of unease, prompted her to retrieve it. The letter contained a short note filled with intimate undertones, something about missing our last evening together and longing for that private moment. Natalie's heart pounded. The words reeled in her head, and an icy dread crept over her. The notion that Charlie might be unfaithful set off alarms, but she tried to silence the nagging fear. After all, trust was the bedrock of marriage. Yet doubts began to gnaw at her soul. Charlie dismissed the letter as an old friend being dramatic, and that explanation for the moment soothed her. But from that day onward, Natalie's radar for subtle changes sharpened. She noticed how Charlie typed away on his phone at odd hours, how his eyes darted when she entered the room, and the way his voice took on a hushed tone whenever he answered unexpected calls. One night, as she walked past the study, she overheard Charlie say Margaret's name. His tone was both urgent and affectionate, nothing like the flippant way he brushed off his business associates. Natalie's pulse quickened. She decided not to confront him immediately, but to watch and wait, hoping in vain that she was mistaken. Life continued, though a sense of tension pervaded the mansion. Social events, grand galas, and philanthropic luncheons marched on as usual. Photographers captured perfectly crafted smiles from both husband and wife. On Instagram, Natalie posted pictures promoting literacy drives, while Charlie updated followers about new vineyard expansions. Their so-called #power couple hashtag trended every now and then, attracting compliments and fueling envy. Meanwhile, Natalie fought an internal battle between a desire for truth and a desperation to maintain the facade. Then came the night at the Carter Family Charity Ball, a glittering event held at San Francisco's historic Fairmont Hotel. Charlie spent the evening engrossed in conversation with Margaret West, who arrived in a figure-hugging emerald gown. At first, Natalie tried to convince herself they were discussing philanthropic matters, but as she watched them from across the ballroom, her heart sank. The body language was too familiar an intimacy beyond mere acquaintances. Their laughter, the way Margaret leaned in to whisper in Charlie's ear, and how Charlie's gaze lingered on her, just a bit too long. There was a charge in the air that felt wrong, and everyone around them seemed oblivious, too absorbed in their own glamorous lives. Natalie braced herself against the bar, a swirl of conflicting emotions threatening to suffocate her. She recalled the letter, the quiet phone calls, and the cryptic hints of betrayal. Reality was pressing in, forcing her to acknowledge the truth she had tried so hard to avoid. When the band struck up a waltz, Charlie led Margaret onto the dance floor. The intimacy in their dance burned into Natalie's eyes, leaving her with no room for denial. Deep down, she knew the glass of her perfect life had cracked, and she could no longer pretend everything was fine. In the week following the Carter family charity ball, Natalie wrestled with sleepless nights and a racing mind. She played out every possible scenario in her head, confronting Charlie directly, hiring a private investigator, or even reaching out to Margaret herself. Each option felt daunting. She feared the truth, but detested lies even more. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rattled the wide-panelled windows of the Ashworth mansion, Natalie made a decisive move. She confronted Charlie in his private study, a room lined with shelves of first-edition novels and dotted with relics from his travels. Lightning flashes outside cast long shadows across the Persian rug. She took a deep breath. "Charlie," she began, her voice trembling, "I need to know if there's something going on between you and Margaret West." Charlie looked up from his laptop, his face momentarily stricken before he composed himself. "Natalie, please," he replied, shutting the device. "Margaret is just a friend, a business associate, someone who's invested in some of our projects." His protest sounded carefully rehearsed, as though he'd prepared this explanation a dozen times. "I saw the way you two danced," Natalie said, stepping closer, "and I found that letter weeks ago, the one you tried to throw away. You can't lie to me, not anymore." Silence filled the space between them, heavy and suffocating. The storm outside raged, and for a moment it seemed as if the mansion itself held its breath. When Charlie finally spoke, his voice was cautious. "Look, Margaret and we have a complicated history. It started before I met you," he said, a flicker of guilt crossing his features. "I tried to end things, but it got messy." "She's persistent." Natalie's anger flared. "So you admit there was something?" Her eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. "Why didn't you tell me about this before we got married?" Charlie shook his head, as though trying to banish an unpleasant memory. "It was over, or at least I thought it was. Then she showed up in my life again, right around the time you got more involved in charity work. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I could handle it." Natalie's disappointment mixed with a raw sense of betrayal. "And how do I know it's still not happening?" she demanded, voice quivering. He said nothing, which was answer enough. In that moment, a painful understanding settled over Natalie. The man she had pledged her life to was deeply flawed, and no amount of rationalization could change that. She turned toward the door, anger coursing through her veins, but also heartbreak. Each step out of that study felt like walking away from the life she believed, in the illusions she had worked so hard to maintain. She locked herself in her bedroom, ignoring the staff's concerned inquiries. Hours later, an envelope slid under her door. Inside was a short note in Charlie's handwriting. "Natalie, please, let's talk. I never meant for this to happen. Give me a chance to explain everything, see?" But she didn't want to talk. She wanted to scream, to cry, to vanish from this elaborate mansion that now felt like a cage. Eventually, the storm subsided into a steady rainfall. Natalie stared out her window, realizing that her entire world had shifted. She understood she'd have to make a choice, continue living a lie for the sake of the Ashworth name, or demand answers and risk tearing their perfect image apart. That night, for the first time in her marriage, she thought seriously about leaving Charlie. Yet even that decision was complicated. She needed to know the full extent of his betrayal, whether it was truly over, and whether Charlie's heart belonged to someone else entirely. Little did she know that more shocking twists awaited her, a chain of events that would stretch far beyond the boundaries of their marriage, culminating in one unforgettable funeral where secrets would collide in spectacular fashion. Despite the emotional turmoil, Natalie's responsibilities beckoned. The Ashworth Family Foundation had an upcoming fundraiser to build libraries in several underprivileged districts. Normally she would have tackled the preparations with enthusiasm, but her mind felt fragmented. Still, she held firm to her sense of duty. These libraries mattered, and letting down those children felt like yet another betrayal she couldn't bear. During an afternoon meeting with her foundation team, she found herself struggling to focus. Stacks of proposals and budget outlines sat before her, but her vision blurred with swirling thoughts of Charlie and Margaret West. Seated across the polished mahogany table was her trusted advisor, Tara Gillespie, who had known Natalie since college. Tara discreetly studied Natalie's tired eyes and tightened jaw. When the meeting ended, Tara asked, "Nats, are you all right? You seemed a bit distant." The room had emptied, leaving them alone. Natalie let out a weary sigh. She adored Tara for her straightforward nature. If there was anyone she could trust right now, it was her. "It's Charlie," she murmured, her voice breaking slightly. I'm pretty sure he's having an affair." Tara's eyes widened with genuine concern. "Oh, Natalie, I'm so sorry. Do you have proof?" Natalie nodded, "Enough to know something's wrong." The texts, letters, the way they act together. Tara reached across the table to squeeze Natalie's hand. "You're strong, but you don't have to handle this alone. Talk to someone you trust. A counselor, a lawyer, just don't bottle it up." Those words stayed with Natalie. She considered seeking therapy or confiding in close family members. But her family, the Townsends, had always prized composure and privacy. Her father, Richard Townsend, even though loving, was old-fashioned enough to say something like "handle it behind closed doors, dear." Yet the idea of telling no one made her feel isolated and powerless. Amid the swirling chaos, Natalie received surprising news: she was pregnant. The doctor's voice over the phone confirmed that at roughly 6 weeks along, her initial symptoms of fatigue and nausea weren't stress-related, but indicative of new life. For a moment, every concern about Charlie faded away, replaced by a rush of joy and trepidation. She had always yearned for a family, imagining the patter of small feet around the halls of the estate. But the timing felt crushingly ironic. How could she bring a child into a marriage that was hanging by a thread? That night, Natalie paced in front of the grand fireplace, replaying possible ways to tell Charlie. Should she keep it a secret until things settled, or share the news and hope this child might push him to reevaluate his indiscretions? She feared turning a baby into a bargaining chip, but she also desperately wanted to salvage her marriage. In the end, she decided the truth belonged in the open. She found Charlie alone in the library, nursing a whiskey. His eyes were filled with regret the moment he saw her. "Charlie," Natalie began, voice trembling, "I'm pregnant." He froze, shock contorting his features before he managed to stammer, We're going to have a baby." She nodded, tears welling. The conflicting emotions coursing through her love, betrayal, fear, hope, felt overwhelming. Charlie's face softened, and he rushed forward to embrace her. In that fleeting moment, she almost believed everything could be okay. "I'm so sorry, Natalie," he whispered into her hair, his hold warm but also tinged with desperation. Whatever's been going on, I promise I'll fix it. We'll make this work. For the slightest heartbeat, Natalie wanted to trust him, to breathe in his words as truth. Yet in the back of her mind, Margaret West lingered like a shadow. Natalie might have been carrying Charlie's child, but was he truly ready to let go of his mistress? Hope flickered in her chest, but a gnawing doubt coiled just beneath it, waiting for the next revelation to strike. In the days that followed the pregnancy announcement, Charlie seemed reinvigorated. He accompanied Natalie to her doctor's appointments and even cleared space in his hectic schedule to attend prenatal classes. Fancy private sessions booked by the best obstetrician in Napa. The staff at the mansion noticed the shift as well. Charlie was home for dinner more often, doting on Natalie and making an earnest effort to be involved in the baby's development. For a fleeting moment, it looked like the crisis might subside under the unifying hope of a child, but life rarely offers clean resolutions when unresolved passions lurk in the background. One late evening, Natalie stood in the bedroom, about to change into her pajamas, when Charlie's phone buzzed with a text message. He was in the shower, and ordinarily Natalie wouldn't dare invade his privacy, but the phone kept buzzing multiple messages. Concerned it might be urgent, she glanced at the screen. The name Margaret West lit up, her heart pounded, and despite her better judgment, she unlocked the phone using Charlie's passcode, which she'd seen him enter countless times. A series of texts greeted her. Margaret, I can't stand this distance anymore. Margaret, call me. I want to see you. Margaret, I'm tired of being your secret. Natalie's hands shook. She couldn't stop herself from scrolling further. Charlie, we have to be careful. Natalie is suspicious. Margaret, you promised me more once everything settled. Charlie, the first need time. This baby changes everything. A sickening wave of betrayal crashed over Natalie. It was worse than she feared. Charlie wasn't just entangled in an old fling. He was actively juggling the mistress alongside their new pregnancy. She quickly placed the phone back where it was, her mind spinning. Any glimmer of hope she'd nurtured now felt like a cruel joke. When Charlie emerged from the shower, water droplets clinging to his hair, Natalie stared at him, tears brimming in her eyes. Her stomach twisted with rage and heartbreak, a stark reminder that she was carrying his child while he was still wrapped around Margaret's finger. "What's wrong?" he asked, worry knitted across his brow. Natalie opened her mouth to speak, but the intensity of her emotions robbed her of words. Instead, she turned away, hugging herself protectively. "I saw your phone," she finally said, her voice hollow. Charlie's eyes darkened with alarm, but he tried to maintain composure. "Natalie, let me explain." "Explain what?" she snapped, stepping forward. She could feel her pulse thrumming in her fingertips. "That you have no respect for me or this child. That your affair is still ongoing." He reached out to grab her hand, but she pulled away. "It's complicated," he muttered, averting his gaze. "I never wanted to hurt you, but Margaret, she and I, there's a lot of history." "History?" Natalie's voice cracked. "We're about to have a baby, Charlie. There shouldn't be any room for history. You should be fully present, fully committed." Her tears fell then, unstoppable. A strangled sob escaped her lips as she tried to cling to the remnants of her dignity. Charlie hesitated, his eyes flickering with guilt. "I'm sorry," he said again, weaker this time, as though he knew no apology could suffice. "I'm going to end it, I promise." But Natalie had heard promises before, her vision blurred with tears. She grabbed her robe and rushed to the door, ignoring Charlie's pleas. Only one thought echoed in her mind. She wasn't just fighting for her marriage, she was fighting for the well-being of her unborn child. And the man who should have been her rock had turned out to have feet of clay. Everything she believed about their bright future suddenly felt like a flimsy facade. Unable to sleep that night, Natalie wandered the cavernous halls, eventually ending up in the kitchen at dawn. the mansion's head chef, Marcel, was prepping croissants and coffee. He offered a sympathetic smile, perhaps sensing her distress. Natalie managed a nod of thanks as she poured herself some water. Outside the windows, the first rays of sunlight painted the vineyards in golden hues, but they brought no comfort. By midday, a mounting urge to confront Margaret overwhelmed her. She had her driver, Lucas, bring the car around and set off without telling Charlie. If Charlie wouldn't give her clarity, perhaps Margaret would. Searching Margaret's name online yielded an address in Beverly Hills, likely the same place from which that initial letter had arrived. As the car navigated Los Angeles traffic, Natalie's stomach twisted with a mix of fear and determination. Margaret West was a relative unknown in high society, but a quick Google search revealed she had modeled briefly and done some brand partnerships in collaboration with elite events. She had also helped Charlie broker a deal with an Italian fashion house that wanted to partner with the Ashworth estates for exclusive soirees. The synergy had apparently turned personal. And here Natalie was, pregnant, humiliated, and desperate for answers. After hours on the road, she arrived at a sleek, modern condo tower in Beverly Hills. The doorman hesitated, eyeing Natalie's formal attire and polite request to see Miss Margaret West. Perhaps because of her impeccable demeanor, or maybe the Townsend name still carried weight, he allowed her up. The elevator ride felt interminable, each ding fueling her nervous energy. When the doors opened on the 22nd floor, Natalie stepped into a quiet corridor bathed in muted light. Apartment 2207, the door read. She gathered her courage and knocked. Margaret answered in a black silk robe, hair loose around her shoulders. A flicker of recognition crossed her face, but she covered it with a cool smile. "Natalie," she said, as though greeting a casual acquaintance, not the wife of her lover. "I was expecting you sooner or later." Natalie swallowed hard. "We need to talk." Margaret stepped aside, allowing her entry into a living space that screamed modern luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the Los Angeles skyline. Artwork dotted the walls, possibly original pieces, though likely purchased with Charlie's influence. The air smelled faintly of expensive candles and fresh orchids. "Please, sit," Margaret said. Her tone was almost polite, if not for the undercurrent of dismissiveness. Natalie remained standing. "I want to know what's really happening between you and my husband," Natalie demanded, voice trembling with a cocktail of rage, heartbreak, and betrayal. Margaret arched an eyebrow. "Isn't it obvious by now?" She sighed and moved to the open kitchen, retrieving a bottle of mineral water. "Charlie and I have a history. He never quite let go of me, even when he married you. I won't apologize for our relationship. We're connected in a way you wouldn't understand." Natalie's heart pounded. She pressed a hand to her abdomen, reminding herself of the baby she carried. "So you're saying it's ongoing, even after I told him I'm pregnant?" Margaret sipped her water calmly. "Yes. He tried to break things off a few times, but there's something deeper between us." She set the glass down. "If you came here to fight or to cry, I won't stop you. But you need to know Charlie is not the man you think he is." A surge of anger flared in Natalie. "He's the father of my child. Whatever's gone on, that child changes everything." At that, Margaret laughed a short, bitter sound. "Changes everything for you, maybe. But Charlie's been torn for a while. He cares about you, but he's not sure he wants to be tied down. The baby complicates it all." Natalie wanted to scream. The cruelty of Margaret's composure was staggering. "If you think you can just waltz in and destroy my family, Margaret interrupted. "Charlie's been living a double life. Don't pin all the blame on me. He's the one who couldn't stay faithful, who wouldn't choose." Tears stung Natalie's eyes. She realized Margaret was right about one thing. Charlie had lied to them both, or at least misled them. "Then what do you want from him?" she asked, voice trembling. Margaret's gaze hardened. I want him to be honest with himself. If it's me he wants, then let him say it openly. If it's you, then let him cut me loose. But he's been dancing between us, and I'm tired of being the secret. Before the conversation could escalate, Natalie turned to leave, feeling physically ill. Just as she reached the door, Margaret spoke again. For what it's worth, I didn't plan any of this. It just happened. Natalie didn't reply. She exited the condo, her mind reeling with Margaret's words. The baby deserved a father, but Natalie deserved a husband who was loyal. She realized, with dawning horror, that the life she fought so hard to build might already be crumbling beyond repair. Not long after her confrontation with Margaret, Natalie noticed something alarming. Paparazzi outside the Napa estate gates, camera lenses poised like rifles. At first, she thought they were after their usual glimpse of Charlie Ashworth, the famed entrepreneur. But the frequency of flashbulbs intensified, and tabloids began printing salacious headlines: Ashworth marriage on the rocks, and mystery woman linked to wine magnate. Charlie's PR team scrambled to contain the story. They issued carefully worded statements denying any marital troubles. Charlie took to social media to post a photo of him and Natalie smiling on the vineyard grounds, captioned "grateful every day." The move garnered supportive comments from fans, but insiders whispered it was damage control. Natalie hated that her personal pain was now fodder for public speculation. As the tabloids pressed further, rumors emerged that Margaret West was pregnant, a false story that Margaret herself seemed to leak for attention. Natalie felt trapped. In her personal life, she wrestled with heartbreak and the demands of pregnancy publicly. She was expected to maintain a flawless facade. Even her philanthropic events were overshadowed by gossip. At one library dedication ceremony, a reporter asked intrusive questions about Charlie's alleged affair, and she had to fight back tears in front of cameras. Privately, Charlie's behavior grew more anxious. He spent hours on conference calls with lawyers, spin doctors, and managers trying to salvage the Ashworth brand. We can't let this ruin us, he told Natalie more than once. But us in that sentence felt hollow. It was evident he cared about the company's reputation more than repairing their fractured relationship. Still, he attempted small gestures: a rose bouquet delivered to her room, a handwritten note apologizing for the stress. Nothing addressed the core issue: trust. The scandal took a darker turn when Margaret gave an exclusive interview to a celebrity gossip show, claiming she and Charlie had been in love for years and that she was tired of living in the shadows. She painted herself as a victim of circumstance, trapped by Charlie's promises to leave Natalie when the time was right. The clip went viral. Natalie watched it alone in her bedroom, feeling physically ill as Margaret flirted with the camera, dishing out personal details of her time with Charlie, places they dined, vacations they took. By now, the Townsend family was livid. Natalie's father, Richard, left her dozens of voicemails, urging her to handle the matter decisively to protect the family's reputation. Her mother, Belinda, wrote a scathing letter to Charlie, accusing him of tainting the Townsend name. None of this brought Natalie any closer to a resolution. If anything, it deepened her sense of isolation. In a desperate attempt to stave off public relations disaster, Charlie's lawyers filed a cease and desist against Margaret West for defamation. Margaret, in turn, threatened to release more damning evidence. It became an all-out media war, and Natalie, nearing her second trimester, worried incessantly about the stress harming her unborn child. At a routine prenatal checkup, her doctor noted elevated blood pressure, warning her to find ways to reduce stress or risk complications. Natalie questioned whether it was time to walk away. Yet something kept her tethered, maybe fear, maybe love. She had married Charlie believing in a future that now seemed irretrievably broken, but she also yearned for her baby to have a stable home. The swirl of paparazzi, lawyers and gossip columnists left her paralyzed by uncertainty. Meanwhile, the cracks in the Ashworth empire started to show. A major investor in one of Charlie's tech ventures pulled out, citing bad publicity. A wine reviewer for a top magazine wrote a subtly negative piece, implying the brand's name was overshadowed by personal scandal. Charlie snapped at employees and spent nights locked in his office, the glow of his computer screen revealing new wrinkles of worry etched into his face. Throughout it all, Natalie felt like she was standing in the eye of a hurricane, everything whirling around her, unstoppable, while she clung desperately to the last vestiges of her sanity and hope. The final straw came during a disastrous dinner at the estate, intended to smooth over relations with an important investor couple, Ian and Sophia Moretti. They were longtime supporters of the Ashworth brand, known for pouring millions into various expansions. If anyone could help salvage the company's image, it was them. Charlie insisted on hosting an elegant evening. A private chef prepared a 7-course meal, accompanied by the Ashworth Reserve wines. Crystal chandeliers shimmered, and fresh flowers draped every surface. Natalie, wearing a flowing sapphire gown, tried her best to project confidence. She welcomed the guests with a gracious smile, praying this night would go smoothly. But tension crackled in the air. Charlie avoided eye contact, preoccupied with his phone. After they settled in the dining hall, the polite banter quickly veered into awkward territory. Ian tried praising the new line of wines, but Sophia cut in. "We heard some troubling news about your personal affairs, Charlie," she said in hushed tones, darting a glance at Natalie. "We just want to be sure everything is under control. The markets can be sensitive." Charlie stiffened. "We've dealt with it," he insisted, forcing a jovial tone. "Everything's fine. Natalie and I are doing great, aren't we?" He shot Natalie a pleading look. Natalie, stomach roiling, managed a small nod. "Yes, of course," she replied, feeling the weight of the lie. Just then, Charlie's phone chimed again. He glanced at the screen, and his face paled. Without excusing himself, he stood and strode away, phone pressed to his ear. The Morettis exchanged uneasy glances. Natalie's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She tried to carry on, discussing philanthropic projects and vineyard expansions, but an undercurrent of tension made each moment stifling. When Charlie returned, his expression was grim. He muttered a half-hearted apology to the guests and sat down, barely touching the food. The meal dragged on in an agonizing cycle of forced conversation and conspicuous silences. Eventually, the Morettis thanked their hosts and departed, their politeness strained. It was obvious the dinner had been a flop. As soon as they left, Natalie cornered Charlie in the foyer. "What was that about?" she demanded in a hushed, furious whisper. Charlie ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "Margaret. She's threatening to leak personal photos to the press pictures of us in Europe last year, at hotels, dinners. She says she'll go public with everything unless I meet her demands." Natalie's heart sank. "Demands?" He avoided her gaze. "She wants financial support. And me." The final words came out faintly, like an echo he wished would vanish. For a moment, Natalie couldn't breathe. Rage burned hot in her chest. "And what do you plan to do? Keep paying her off? Keep sneaking around?" Charlie shook his head. "I don't know. I'm trying to protect us, the company, our future. Don't you get that?" She let out a bitter laugh. "You're trying to protect yourself, Charlie. If you cared about me, about our child, you would have cut her off long ago, no matter the cost." Their voices escalated, bouncing off the marble floors and high ceilings. The staff discreetly averted their eyes, pretending not to hear, but the entire estate felt weighed down by this familial meltdown. Finally, Natalie stormed upstairs, tears streaming down her face, and locked the bedroom door behind her. She refused to open it, even as Charlie pounded on the wood, pleading for dialogue. That night, Natalie made a decision. She would call her family's lawyer, James Farnsworth, to discuss separation. The baby's health, her own sanity, depended on escaping this toxic spiral. She had once believed that love could conquer all, but now the cracks had become chasms. The memory of Margaret's cold, unapologetic stare and Charlie's repeated failures to let go haunted her. If this was marriage, it was one built on deception and compromise Natalie could no longer bear. Outside, the wind rustled through the vineyards like a lamenting ghost. Inside, Natalie cried into her pillow, envisioning a lonely future, but also one where she might finally be free from Charlie's betrayals. She clung to the faint hope that leaving might be the only chance to protect her child from the storm. Little did she know, the darkest chapter was yet to unfold. Before any legal actions could materialize, tragedy struck with merciless speed. One evening, while Natalie was in the midst of drafting an email to lawyer James Farnsworth, she received a frantic call from Charlie's personal assistant. Charlie had been in a car accident. The details were scarce something about a collision on a winding road near the estate. Shaken, Natalie rushed to the hospital, her pregnant belly adding urgency and weight to every step. In the emergency room, medical staff buzzed around in a frantic ballet of procedure and heartbreak. Natalie's eyes landed on Charlie, unconscious and hooked to an array of monitors. A doctor informed her that he had suffered severe internal injuries and head trauma. The prognosis was bleak. Natalie crumpled into a chair, overwhelmed by a torrent of guilt, regret, and concern. In that moment, despite the betrayal and lies, she realized she never wished him harm. She wanted him to at least have the chance to redeem himself for the sake of their unborn child. When Charlie briefly regained consciousness, his eyes fluttered. He tried to speak, but the words came out weak and jumbled. Natalie took his hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. She felt his fingers tremble, and in that fleeting moment, they both seemed to acknowledge the fragility of life. "I'm sorry," he mouthed, tears forming at the corners of his eyes. But the doctors couldn't stabilize him for long. As hours became days, Charlie drifted in and out of consciousness, each time weaker than the last. Natalie stayed by his side, her emotions raw. At times, she rubbed her stomach, whispering that their baby needed a healthy father. She wanted him to fight, to survive, to finally do the right thing. During a rare, calm moment, when the machines beeped steadily, Charlie's gaze locked onto hers. He appeared desperate to say something, to share a final confession or vow. Instead, he slipped into a coma and never woke up again. Charlie Ashworth III passed away in the early hours of a quiet Wednesday morning, leaving Natalie stunned, alone, and pregnant. News outlets erupted with headlines: "Tragic end for wine mogul Charlie Ashworth and Ashworth Empire, shaken by sudden loss." Some insinuated that stress from the scandal might have impaired his driving. Others painted him as a flawed but brilliant businessman whose ambition ended too soon. Natalie was too numb to care. She had only a few fleeting memories of him from his final days, those tired eyes that seemed to carry regret, the silent pleas for forgiveness. Any illusions of closure evaporated, leaving her with a swirl of unresolved emotions. Margaret West's name appeared in some tabloids, but she remained silent publicly. Perhaps she, too, was reeling from the sudden finality of Charlie's death. In the days leading up to the funeral, Natalie had to navigate a swarm of responsibilities: funeral arrangements, estate matters, endless phone calls. Lawyers circled like vultures, brandishing documents and claiming to have Charlie's final instructions. Amid the chaos, she felt numb, On one hand, her unborn child offered hope. On the other, she was grappling with heartbreak and betrayal that could no longer be mended by apologies. Charlie's passing was not a clean break from the drama. If anything, it left countless questions unanswered. Had he intended to choose Margaret? Would he have come to his senses for their baby? Natalie would never truly know. But there was a funeral to plan, a public to appease, and a torrent of grief to subdue. All she knew was that she had to face it alone. Charlie's funeral was held on a breezy autumn morning at the Ashworth family's private chapel, nestled amid the vineyard's oldest vines. The Ashworths had buried their ancestors there for generations, each tombstone etched with a legacy of wealth, power, and philanthropic gestures. The press was barred from the solemn ceremony, but throngs of spectators gathered outside the estate gates, hoping for a glimpse of mourning high society. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with hushed conversations, muffled sobs, and the scent of white lilies. Natalie stood at the entrance, dressed in a simple black dress that accommodated her pregnant belly. Friends, business associates, and extended family arrived in elegant funeral attire, offering their condolences. Some guests gave her quick, pitying glances. Others avoided her gaze altogether, uncertain how to address the messy scandal surrounding Charlie's final days. Halfway through the somber greeting line, Margaret West appeared. She wore a sleek, form-fitting black ensemble, her face concealed behind a short veil. A tense hush fell over the immediate area as people recognized her. Whispers spread like wildfire. Wasn't she the mistress? How dare she show up here? But Margaret walked forward with a calm poise that seemed defiant. For a moment, she locked eyes with Natalie. In that suspended second, Natalie's heart pounded. She recalled every hurtful revelation, every tabloid headline, and every tear she had shed. Yet, something in Margaret's expression was different now. Regret? Sorrow? Perhaps. Margaret stepped aside and found a seat near the back, alone. Nobody joined her. Nobody comforted her. She was the outcast at this funeral, paying respects to a man she had loved in her own destructive way. The eulogies began. An elderly relative spoke of Charlie's lineage, praising the family's philanthropic endeavors. A business partner lauded his entrepreneurial genius. Natalie sat silently, her eyes fixated on the casket draped in white roses. She wondered, should she speak? She had loved Charlie once, wholeheartedly, and even after all the pain, that love wasn't entirely extinguished. When the officiant invited her to deliver her parting words, Natalie rose, footsteps echoing against the marble floor. She stood behind the lectern, scanning the crowd. Many faces brimmed with sympathy, some were uncomfortably curious. Margaret, seated at the back, had lifted her veil, revealing eyes brimmed with tears. Taking a shaky breath, Natalie began. Charlie was a brilliant, complicated man. He built an empire from a single vineyard and touched many lives, including mine. I won't pretend our marriage was perfect. We had struggles, some very public, some deeply private. But I choose to remember the moments of kindness, the hopes we shared, and the child he will never meet. Her voice faltered as she caressed her belly. I stand here carrying the greatest gift we ever created together. And though Charlie is gone, I hope this child will inherit the best of him, his ambition, his generosity, and maybe even his smile. I can't say I fully understood Charlie in the end, but I know he wanted to be better. I pray he's found peace, and I pray I find the strength to carry on. She ended her eulogy with trembling lips and tear-filled eyes. As she walked back to her seat, a hush enveloped the chapel, broken only by quiet sobs. The officiant concluded the service with a final prayer, and the pallbearers carried Charlie's casket out to the family burial plot. In that somber procession, the only sound was the soft crunch of gravel underfoot and the distant hum of the wind through the vines. Out by the gravesite, amidst the recitation of a final blessing, Margaret West strode forward. A ripple of shock seized the crowd, but before they could protest, she placed a single red rose on the casket. Her eyes flickered to Natalie, who stood on the opposite side of the coffin. Despite the swirling rumors and the cruelty that had defined their relationship, Margaret offered a subtle nod of respect. In that moment, Natalie understood that grief transcended betrayal. She had come to realize that Margaret, too, had lost someone she cared for. Maybe they could never be friends, never share more than silent acknowledgement, but the threads of grief bound them. Even so, there was only one woman who stood tall in the eyes of everyone present: Natalie. She was the widow carrying the heir of the Ashworth lineage, embodying both heartbreak and resilience. When the casket was finally lowered, most guests turned away, tears or solemn expressions on their faces. Margaret lingered briefly, then departed quietly. Natalie remained, standing proud, hand resting on her unborn child. She felt a bittersweet cocktail of relief and sorrow. The man who had hurt her was gone. The baby would never know its father. Yet her heart resolved one thing: she would face tomorrow with strength and dignity, for her child and for herself. In the weeks following the funeral, the Ashworth estate felt hollow. Media coverage recapped Charlie's funeral as a grand, tragic affair, with some tabloids noting the dramatic entrance of the mistress. Natalie ignored the headlines. She channeled her energy into finalizing estate matters with lawyers and refocusing the Ashworth Family Foundation's future. With Charlie's legal affairs sorted, Natalie discovered something unexpected in his final will. Despite their marital troubles, Charlie had designated her as the primary trustee, ensuring a substantial inheritance for their child. He had also left instructions for philanthropic expansions, libraries, community centers, educational programs. Reading through these documents late one night, tears blurred her vision. Perhaps in his final moments, he had tried to do right by her and the future they once dreamed of. The public eventually moved on to the next sensational story. But for Natalie, the aftermath was both quiet and daunting. She walked the rows of vines at sunrise, imagining how she would teach their child about the land, about grapes and harvest seasons, about the Ashworth legacy that wasn't just about money, it was about family, community, and resilience. Yes, the heartbreak lingered, but so did a sliver of peace. A few months later, Natalie gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Charles Townsend Ashworth, honoring both families. Holding her son for the first time, she felt an overwhelming surge of protectiveness and love. Here was a new beginning, an innocent life, free from the sins and scandals of the past. She vowed to nurture him with openness and honesty, determined he wouldn't grow up under the same shadows that had haunted Charlie. As for Margaret West, she slipped into obscurity. Rumors placed her in Europe, or perhaps back in Beverly Hills. She never publicly contested the will or sought out Natalie. In a surprising move, she released a statement to a small magazine expressing regret for the hurt she caused. It was fleeting, but it suggested she, too, was ready to leave the past behind. In time, the Ashworth estate thrived again. Natalie became known not just as the widow of Charlie Ashworth, but as a capable steward of his empire. Investors praised her leadership, and philanthropic circles admired how she channeled resources into literacy programs for children. Photos of her cradling baby Charles circulated with headlines calling her the unstoppable mother or Ashworth's guiding light. She seldom granted interviews, keeping her focus on the child in her arms and the legacy entrusted to her. For Natalie, the real victory wasn't about controlling the narrative in the media. It was about finding inner peace and forging a path forward for her son. She often reminded herself that life could pivot in the blink of an eye, from lavish celebrations to devastating funerals. But through it all, one's character, resilience, and compassion remain the truest measure of worth. When she tucked Charles into his crib at night, she whispered stories of vineyards and starlit skies. She told him that his father was a complicated man who, despite his flaws, once dreamed of building a legacy for him. She spoke of love, heartbreak, and forgiveness lessons that shaped her into the woman she now was. And though her voice sometimes trembled with lingering sorrow, it also carried hope, because in every new dawn there was a promise that they could rise from the wreckage, guided by the unbreakable bond of a mother's love. Thank you for joining me in this emotional journey through the life and trials of Natalie Ashworth, a story of passion, betrayal, and resilience in the face of heartbreak. From grand vineyards to private funeral chapels, we witnessed how even the wealthiest and most influential lives can unravel under the weight of hidden truths. Yet hope blooms in the darkest moments. Natalie's unwavering love for her unborn child illuminated her path toward healing and redemption. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who might appreciate a tale of courage and perseverance. And if you want more stories rich in drama, heartbreak, and hope, be sure to subscribe to this channel. Your support means the world, and together we can explore more narratives that remind us of our shared humanity. Thank you, and see you in the next video.